So I want to show you where does this term Bharatiya come from, or by extension the term India, and how ancient this identity is, what is the basis of this identity, and so on and so forth. So let's start at the very, very beginning. Where does this term Bharata come from? What is the very first and earliest use of the term Bharata? It turns out that this word Bharata relates to a tribe mentioned in the Rig Veda. The tribe is also called the Trutsu tribe. It's a Vedic tribe. And this tribe lives as described in the Rig Veda. By the way, the Rig Veda is a Bronze Age document which is at least 4,500, if not 5,000 years old. So it is a very ancient document, or rather a composition. It's not quite a document since it was orally transmitted for much of its existence. But this compilation of the Rig Veda mentions this tribe called the Bharatas who live along a river called the Sarswathi. Incidentally, this river Sarswathi is so associated with the name Bharata that is even known as Bharati. Even today when you do Saraswati Puja, very often you will end the puja by saying Bhagavati Bharati Devi Namaste. So this association of the Bharatas to the Saraswati Nadi is a very important one. And the Saraswati Nadi is a very critical geographical feature of the Rig Veda. In fact, by some margin, it is the most important geographical feature. 45 of its hymns are dedicated to it. Its name appears 72 times. It's repeatedly lauded as limitless, unbroken, swift-flowing, as mother of rivers or Sindhu Mata. Remember, the word Sindhu means a river, generically, not just of the Indus. And so it is clearly a very, very important geographical feature, and this tribe lives next to this river. Now, there has been, for a very long time, controversy over where this Saraswati river is. And colonial era historians would try to make the case that this river was either mythical or that it was somewhere in Central Asia, Afghanistan, and so on. But frankly, there is absolutely no reason for there to be any doubt about where it is, because the Rig Veda tells me where it is. There is something called the Nadi Stuti Suktam in the Rig Veda in book 10. I have given you all the numbers, verse, etc., which clearly states that the Saraswati river is between the Yamuna and the Saraswati. So in this Nadi Stuti Suktam, all the rivers are enumerated from east to west one by one. It goes, O Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shutudru, which is the Sutlej, Parushni, Ravi, Ashkini, Chenab, and so on. So it is an enumeration of rivers east to west, and it is very, very clear here that the Saraswati is a river between the Yamuna and the Shutudru, i.e. the Sutlej. Now, I'm going to ask my colleagues here to chant the Nadi Stuti Suktam so that you can hear it for yourself. Over to you.
Om Imam me Gange Yamune Saraswati Shutudristomam Sachata Parushnya Asiknya Marudvrudhe Vitastayarji Kiye Shrunuhya Sushomaya Om.
So, first of all, it's clear it's between the Yamuna and the Sutlej. We have further information. The Rig Veda also tells it that this river flowed from the mountains, the Himalayas, to the ocean. And so there is a chant there says, pure is a course from the mountains to the ocean, alone of the streams Saraswati hath listened. So again, let me ask my colleagues to chant this section.
Om Eka Chetat Saraswati Nadinam Shuchiryati Giribhya Asamudrat Rayaschetanti भुवनस्य भूरे घृतं पयोदुदुहे नाभूषाय Om.
So now we know we have a river that's between the Yamuna and the Sutlej, and it flows from the mountains in the north to the ocean. Now, there is no such river in existence today. So the question is there any evidence of such a river ever existing? And it turns out there is. So whether you take you take satellite photographs or you do ground proofing, there is more than adequate evidence of such a river existing in exactly that place that is described in the Rig Veda, and that it later dried up. And I will come to that drying up part a little later. But here it is. These are the green lines you can see. This is the course of the Saraswati river. It existed over a very long geological period, so its course did wander significantly from time to time. So it has different courses, and yes, the original text also mentioned that it was a bit of a wandering river. But if you look, it starts up with a bunch of tributaries flowing into it in the north. Then it comes together somewhere in Haryana, flows through northern Rajasthan into what is now Pakistan, flows back into Gujarat and flows into its estuary, which is now the Run of Kutch. If you go to the Run of Kutch today, you see these salt flats. Well, they are the remnants of the estuary of the Saraswati. So here we have a tribe that lived along a river that we know existed. And in the Rig Veda, this tribe, the Bharatas, not only mention that they lived along this river Saraswati, they also mention the name of their homeland. And the name they call their homeland is the Sapta Sindhu, which is the land of the 7 rivers. Now, a lot of scholars tend to say that, looking around, where is this land of 7 rivers? They very often will take the view that it is the Saraswati, the 5 rivers of Punjab, and the Sindhu. That, unfortunately, is not what is borne out by the text itself. If you look at the text, it's quite interesting that none of the rivers of Punjab or the Indus are ever mentioned as being a part of the 7 rivers. What is mentioned, however, is that it has something to do with the Saraswati. So the Saraswati is always mentioned in the context of this river. In fact, you have again here a chant which says, coming together, glorious, loudly roaring, Saraswati, mother of floods, Sindhu Mata, the 7th, with copious milk, with fair streams strongly flowing, fully swelled with the volume of their waters. So it's very, very clear what you are dealing really with is the Saraswati and all the tributaries flowing into the Saraswati. In fact, it is with the coming together of all these rivers that the Saraswati is created, i.e. the Sapta Sindhu is created. In other words, you're dealing with a river system and a very limited river system. But before I come to that, let me ask my colleagues to chant this for you so that you can hear what it sounds like.
Om Ayat Sakam Yashaso Vavashana Saraswati Saptathi Sindhu Mata Ya Sushvayanda Sudugha Sudhara Abhisvena Payasa Pipyanaha Om.
So now if we are dealing with only the Saraswati and its tributaries, and we know from the geological evidence that they were relatively in a very ancient times, these tributaries may have included the Sutlej and the Yamuna as well. But very likely by the time the Rig Veda was composed, we are dealing with a relatively small area and of tributaries flowing into the Saraswati. Essentially, we were probably dealing with nothing much more than a small area which is today called Haryana. Little bit of maybe northern Rajasthan, maybe a little bit of eastern Punjab, but basically we are dealing with Haryana. And this was the homeland of this tribe called the Bharatas. Now the question immediately arises that if we are dealing with a small Haryanavi tribe living in this very limited area, how is it that it came to signify the wider landscape of the subcontinent? And why do all of us, very few of us will probably be from Haryana, why do we call ourselves the Bharatas? In order to understand this, you need to move to understanding a major political event. But before that, let me again show you the importance of Haryana to this landscape. So in the Mahabharata, as many of you know, Balram, who was the elder brother of Sri Krishna, did not participate in the Kurukshetra war. Instead, he went on a pilgrimage and walked along the Sarswathi from where it entered the sea near Gujarat and walked along what was by then mostly a dried riverbed. And he kept walking till he reached a place called Vinashana, where the river was still flowing, but it was disappearing into the sands. And then he says there that there are these 7 streams of Saraswati which flow into the Saraswati and combine together to create the Saraswati. So now comes the interesting part, as I said. Why is it that this small area with this small tribe becomes so important that we all call ourselves the Bharatas? To understand this, you again need to go back to the Rig Veda and look at the first clear political event that we know of our history, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda and is clearly an important event in the Rig Veda, which is the Battle of 10 Kings. So let me explain what happens in the Battle of 10 Kings. In Battle of 10 Kings, what happens is that the Bharatas, who are then led by a chieftain called Sudasa and his guru Vasishtha, they are attacked from the west by an alliance of 10 tribes. So when the tribes attack them, the Bharatas cross the Saraswati and they move westward, and on the banks of the Ravi there is a great battle. And in that battle, the Bharatas completely defeat the 10 tribes. In fact, the Rig Veda clearly describes how the enemy soldiers are drowned trying to escape from the Bharatas in the Ravi river. And 6,666 enemy soldiers are drowned or killed in the battle. Now, given the population of that time, this was quite a significant loss. And as a result of which, Sudasa and the Bharatas begin to create an empire. Again, let me ask my colleagues to chant out the description of the Battle of 10 Kings.
Om Ayat Dasharaja Samita Ayajjavas Sudasamindra Varuna Nayuyudhu Satyarnamadmasada Mupastutir Deva Eshamabhavan Devahu Dishu Dasharajne Pariyattaya Vishvatas Sudasa Indra Varuna Vashikshatam Shvityancho Yatra Namasa Kapardino Dhiyadhivanto Asapanta Tritsavaha Om.
Now with this victory, the Bharata Trutsus become very powerful. They now turn eastward and they defeat another tribe or a chieftain called Bheda on the banks of the Yamuna. So now you have a large empire extending from Punjab in the west to western UP. And then chieftain Sudasa conducts the Rajasuya and Ashwamedha Yagyas, and he declares himself the Chakravartin, or the universal monarch. It's the first time in our history you have a universal monarch, or what we would call an emperor. Now, is this why we call ourselves the Bharatas? No. It is about what they did next, and that is quite interesting. Having defeated all these tribes, you would have imagined that the Bharatas would now say that, look, our gods are bigger than your gods, therefore you must worship our gods. This is typically what happened throughout history when victorious meet the defeated. They said, our gods must be more powerful to have been able to defeat your gods. You must now accept our gods. But this is not what the Bharatas did. What they did is quite interesting. They asked all the thinkers and rishis and so on of all the defeated tribes, and also of all surrounding tribes whom they may not have defeated, just happened to be in contact with them. And they called them all together and began to collect together all their knowledge and ideas and so on. And this compilation that they created out of all of this is what we now know as the Vedas. And this is an important thing, because in doing so, they set in motion an idea of assimilation as opposed to imposition. And this is there very clearly laid out in the Rig Veda, which is again, as I said, the oldest of the Vedas, perhaps 5,000 years old. And here, you hear this is very clearly delineated first in the first, and then even more explicitly in the last of the hymns of the Rig Veda. So in the very first of the hymns of the Rig Veda, what is interesting, it is a chant dedicated to Agni, and in that chant, the first thing that is done is that respect is paid to both the ancient and the modern rishis. So this is very interesting. The Rig Veda does not claim to be the beginning point of our civilization in the sense that it is not, in a sense, saying that this is from here on we will do this. No, they are already paying respect to ancient rishis, in fact, of all the tribes. And they are saying that we are inheritors of an existing system of culture, and we are simply assimilating all of this. We are compiling all of this. The Vedas are a samhita, i.e. a compilation. And so again, let me ask my colleagues to chant out where they clearly pay respect to both the ancient and the modern rishis. By the way, the term modern, do remember, in this context relates to the Bronze Age.
Om Agnimile Purohitam Yajnasya Devamritvijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam Agnif Purve Bhirrishi Bhiridyo Nutanairuta Sadevan Yeha Vakshati Om.
So now they put all this material together, and then all these tribes enter into a contract. What is this contract? Basically, sorry, I should have been flicking these charts along the way, which I wasn't. So they come to this they basically construct a common fire of Indic civilization in which they explicitly lay out that all the ancient gods of all the tribes have a place around the fire. In other words, all the gods of all the tribes have a place. And in doing so, they create the contract of Indian civilization, i.e. everybody's gods have a place, and once your gods have been accepted here, you are also expected to accept everybody else's gods. And so, the last chant of the Rig Veda goes as follows: assemble together, let your minds be of one accord, as all the ancient gods take their rightful place around the fire. The place is common, common the assembly, common the mind, so be united, so their thoughts be united. A common purpose do I lay before you, and together we make offerings to the fire. United be your resolve, may all your minds come together, united be the thoughts of all, that we may happily agree. So essentially, this is the starting point with this contract of Bharatiya Sabhyata, i.e. our civilization. Now, again, this is a chant many of you may hear all the time, but now I want my colleagues to chant it so you now understand why it is such an important chant. It is the contract of Indic civilization. Over to you.
Om Samidyo Vase Vrishannagne Vishwanirya इळस्पदे समिध्यसे स नो वसून्याभर सं गच्छध्वं सं वदध्वं सं भोमनांसि जानताम् देवा भागं यथा पूर्वे संजानाना उपासते समानो मन्त्रः समितिः समानी समानं मनः सह चित्तमेषाम् समानं मन्त्रमभिमन्त्रयेव समानेन वो हविषा जुहोमि समानीव आगूतिः समाना हृदयानि वः समानमस्तु वो मनो यथा वस्सु सहसति
Now, this idea of assimilation as a way of growth is a very powerful idea, and it began to spread. And more tribes who may have nothing to do with the original Bharatas accepted this idea and they signed up for it. And therefore, they ended up signing up to becoming Bharatiya or become Bharatas. So, this is why I'm a Bengali from the far east, nothing to do with Haryana. That is why I consider myself a Bharata, because a long time ago, my ancestors must have signed this contract. They contributed their gods to this conversation. I don't know what they were. Since I am a Shakta today, let's presume that maybe it was Durga and Kali and various other goddesses who were then given a space around the sacrificial fire. And in exchange, they accepted the gods of others, Indra and Varuna and Ganesha and others. And so, in this way, this idea began to spread. And so, just as people began to identify themselves as the Bharatas, not just as the tribe, but now as an idea of a civilization, the idea of the 7 rivers also began to spread. So, you heard originally the 7 rivers. Remember the 7 rivers and the idea of Sarswathi and so on? That used to just relate to rivers in and around the northwest of India. Now look, by Puranic times, this is another 2000 years later, when the idea of the Sapta Sindhu has spread, in the post-Vedic texts, you see it covers the entire subcontinent, and therefore, here is a very common chant that is used in ritual bathing. Many of you may also use it in daily life perhaps. Gange cha, Yamune chaiva, Godavari, Saraswati, Narmada, Sindhu, Kaveri. You can see Kaveri and Godavari are there from southern India, Narmada from central India. So there is clearly a spreading of this idea. And again, let me ask my colleagues to chant this.
Om Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sannidhim Kuru. Om.
So, whenever you chant this, do remember what you are really doing. You are reiterating the contract. Now, along with this spread, by the Puranic period, and now you are into the Iron Age, you begin to see all the Puranic texts begin to clearly suggest the delineation of knowledge of the geography of the subcontinent of Bharatvarsha. So, by the Iron Age, we are now maybe 500-600 BC, maybe a little bit earlier as well, and the texts begin to show this. Now, very often the Vishnu Puran is quoted, so I deliberately didn't use it here. I've instead decided to use the Brahma Puran, adapted from Bibek Debroy's translation. Bibek Debroy is both a colleague, a mentor, and a friend who really has helped me put this together. And here is in the Vishnu Puran, in the Brahma Puran, a clear delineation that the Varsha, i.e. the subcontinent, that is north of the ocean and south of the Himalayas, is known by the name Bharata, and the people there are known as Bharati. So clearly delineating where the subcontinent is. It also states that the Kiratas, i.e. the Tibeto-Burmans, live to the east of us, and the Yavanas live to the west of us, i.e. the Greeks live to the west of us. This also dates this particular text. It's not always put in this way, but since in this case it says Yavanas live to the west, this is interesting. That means the Brahma Puran, it must be from the 3rd or 2nd century BC, because this must be just after the Macedonian king Alexander had invaded northwest of India, and indeed the Seleucids were immediately to our west, because otherwise they would have mentioned the Persians or the Sakas or some other group. But this is clearly from the period when the Greeks were ruling just to the west of us, since the Yavanas, i.e. the Greeks, are mentioned. Again, let me ask my colleagues to chant this.
Om Uttarena Samudrasya Himadreschaiva Dakshine Varsham Tad Bharatam Nama Bharatiya Yatra Santatihi Yojananam Sahasram Cha Dvipoyam Dakshinottarat Purve Viratas Tishthanti Paschime Yavanasthitaha